Alright, so here we are on the draw, and we're missing some lands for sure. That immediately stands out. Alright, let's take a mulligan. Once again missing lands, but we do get a scry, and yeah, this is about the same as our opener, almost, but let's see what our opponent's up to. Oh gosh, duress. Well, that's pretty annoying. All of our non-creature spells in our hand are quite good. So it'll be interesting to see which of the three our opponent elects to take. And it looks like the pacifism. So that could mean that our opponent has an aggressive creature they may want to play. So we're just going to go ahead and start setting up with our lands and hopefully land this Honden on turn 4 to start gaining life. And it looks like our opponent also kept a bit of a loose one, as they did not play a land. But we're just going to deploy this Milken. Milken is a pretty good card. It could allow us to play our Honden on turn 3. There's also some synergies, some situations where we would want cards to be in our graveyard. There's other spots where we actively don't want to be milling our own stuff. Okay, here's an Elite Vanguard, so that could become annoying later, but we have some removal and bounce in hand. So it doesn't look like we're going to be able to play our Honden this turn, so just going to go ahead and go with a Thornwood Falls instead. Still looking for another black mana to be able to cast this Annihilate. And I don't think we want to use the Milken. There's some value to putting cards in our graveyard, but we also don't want to mill out. So just going to take the hit for 2 and untap here. And mill a card with our Milken. And we have the option of playing something like a creature or the Mana War, but let's just go ahead and get this Honden into play. We can make either of those plays on our next turn if we want to. And if we do draw another Honden, we can just immediately slam that instead. So there's definitely a couple options depending on what our opponent ends up doing. And okay, Blightsoil Druid. So now this Elvish Vanguard is becoming a pretty juicy Mana War target now that it's a 3/3. And this Blightsoil Druid may mean that our opponent's going to start to be able to cast some more stuff in their hand, but we're just going to go ahead, cast this Mana War on the Elvish Vanguard, and try to set up shop for a long game. So now we have access to Annihilate. Unfortunately, it looks like our opponent is just going to Elephant Guide this Blightsoil Druid, which is pretty good, actually, because we've already used our Mana War. It's going to be kind of tough to deal with that card. But we do have another Pacifism in our deck, another Mana War in our deck, and we actually drew Extract for Darkness. That wasn't one of the cards I was thinking of, but it definitely will work if we want to use it just as a way to get back our Mana War and then potentially bounce this Blightsoil Druid. So we're going to use it, and yep, just milled 2 lands. So our opponent actually, I believe, yes, knows about our Annihilate. So we'll see if that's a card that our opponent feels they can play around or not. But we only have 2 cards. Our opponent has 6 cards in their hand. So that's definitely worth being aware of. And the Elite Vanguard may end up being a card we want to use an Annihilate on. But to start, we're going to attack with this Mana War. And I like just playing the Wake of Vultures out. We have the mana up if we want to sacrifice something to regenerate it, depending on what our opponent ends up doing. And we're working our way towards actually having access to Maelstrom Wanderer mana if we want or need that mana. And that Phyrexian Rager is not an elf, but this Thornwood Archer is. So that's going to pump up the Elite Vanguard. So it'll be interesting to see if our opponent does want to make an attack, but it looks like the answer is no. So we definitely have the option of attacking with our Wake of Vultures, but better than that, we're just going to go ahead and pass the turn, play our land and pass the turn here. We're not in a huge rush. We can annihilate either the Elvish Vanguard or the Thornwood Archer, depending on what our opponent does. And we know that we still have a bunch of Haymakers left in our deck. So, kind of questioning what our opponent is holding, because we know it's mostly spells. So we'll see what happens. It looks like one of them is a Wake of Vulture, so that's going to leave our opponent with 2 cards left. And so we'll see if our opponent wants to make any sort of attack here, or there's a world where I could see our opponent just passing the turn. And if that happens, I don't think we want to do anything. Our opponent now has Wake of Vultures available. And it looks like instead this may just be an attack. So this is a pretty aggressive attack, actually. Pretty surprised by this. But it may be that our opponent wants to sort of thin out the board. So we're just going to put our 3-1 in front of the Vanguard, block the Blightsoul Druid, and then block the Phyrexian Rager, and plan on sacrificing the Milkin to our Wake of Vultures to regenerate our Wake of Vultures. And it could be that our opponent has a trick of some sort. So we'll see if it's something like a Sylvan Might or a Vigorate or something of that nature. But it looks like this trade's going to happen. So it could be that our opponent didn't think we were going to block like that. In either case, pretty happy with that, how that turned out. Although it looks like we are still getting a bit flooded. So just gonna go ahead and pass the turn back. We still have this Annihilate that is in our hand. Now, one thing I wasn't thinking about when our opponent did cast this Wake of Vultures is being able to annihilate this Thornwood Archer when our opponent doesn't have Vulture's mana available. But it looks like the play is just going to be to jam a Havoc Demon into play. and make a pretty aggressive attack. So let's just go ahead and use our Annihilate and see what we draw. So we're going to kill the only creature we can kill on our opponent's side of the table, leaving up a black in case we want to regenerate our Wake of Vultures. And we drew into a Blight Soil Druid, which isn't the most exciting of cards, but I like blocking here and sacrificing now our Mana War so that we keep our flyer in play. But we're still in a bit of trouble here for sure. Our opponent has a Havoc Demon, and we just drew our second copy of the white Honden, so that was not a good draw at all. Because of course Hundens are legendary. That's the downside to playing multiple of the same one. So any of the other Hundens would have been great draws here. Maelstrom Wanderer would have been a great draw. We have a lot of spells that are really good draws in this spot. This was the worst of all of those options, basically. But sometimes that sort of thing does happen. It looks like our opponent has a removal spell for our Wake of Vultures, and this is going to put us on the back foot for sure. So our opponent had double Night's Whisper, so we're just going to take this hit. We're not going to die right now because we are still gaining 2 a turn, and there it is. There's one of our best draws for sure. So let's go ahead and cast this bad boy. We drafted it for a reason. For situations like this, hopefully it pays off, and bang, right away, pacifism. That's going to take care of this Havoc Demon, at least for right now. And then Mana War is also a nice draw, so we're going to cast that. We actually don't have a great card we want to bounce, so we're just going to bounce this Llanowar Elf. But that's going to allow us. This is going to allow us to get in for a big hit, because our creatures have haste. So our opponent's going to go from 13 all the way down to 3, it looks like. And if our opponent had the Llanowar Elf in play, they probably would have simply chump blocked with it. And okay, this Ashnod's Altar means our opponent can sacrifice the Havoc Demon and basically wrath the entire board. So that's pretty bad for us. It completely nullifies all of our creatures, and we know our opponent still at least has a Llanowar Elf, and it looks like the other card in hand is an Emperor Crocodile, but I think our opponent kind of missequenced there, but they're going to have a Llanowar Elf in play here. It looks like they may not have realized exactly the interaction between the Crocodile and how that works. That was something I initially didn't realize when first drafting the set, is when exactly you do sacrifice it, and so it looks like our opponent just played Llanowar Elves instead of the Emperor Crocodile, but that's okay. We're just gonna sit here happily. We drew Commune with the Gods, so let's go ahead and cast it. And alright, so looking at our graveyard, Monk Idealist gets back Pacifism, which could end up being useful, so let's go ahead and grab that. Although we could just get the Phantom Monster just because our opponent's a 3. Sure. Alright, let's get the Phantom Monster. And we'll just try to kill our opponent in a single hit. And so, if our opponent doesn't draw something, even an Emperor Crocodile, for what it's worth, would not have made the difference in this game. Now, if our opponent does end up having a removal spell or a reach creature, then, you know, it's a little bit of a different story. But here we've drawn another of our big spells. So pretty happy to just play this Phyrexian Gargantuan. Draw some cards. And we're in a pretty commanding position here for sure. There's a lot of cards that are going to put us in a good spot. And we drew Visara, so we're not going to be able to deploy it this turn, but next turn we are going to be able to. And our opponent's kind of running on empty at this point. It's interesting though, we haven't really seen our Honden, so they're still all concealed in our deck. There's one of them. So this attack isn't great for us, but we just want our opponent to have nothing on their side of the table. So we're just gonna attack. Our opponent's gonna chump and then eat our flyer, but this Visara should be able to get the job done. And let's see if we can force another game, and it looks like that was good enough. So we see a little bit of the black-green deck our opponent's working with, and we might even want to board out one of the white Hundens just because of how bad it is when you draw two, but it was pretty good just to have it in play, gaining us a bunch of life throughout the course of the game. Hymn to Torak is a card worth boarding in. So yeah, I think we can board in the Hymn. Peregrine Drake is another option. Yeah, if we board in a Hymn, we probably want another land, and we can just kind of go with this if we want to. Monk Idealist ended up actually being a card where we wanted to draw just because our pacifisms ended up in our graveyard. The Milliken is actually pretty unexciting in certain matchups, so we can end up taking that card out. And let's see, what else do we want to board out? I guess we probably just board out a plane since we boarded in a swamp, and then this should be fine. And it looks like we're just gonna have to take a mulligan. And another one land hand. So we had a one lander to opener, now we have a one land hand. Gonna try to keep this on the back of having one land, Prismatic Lens, and a Scry. And we're definitely gonna put that on top. So we don't have cards we're going to be able to play immediately besides the Prismatic Lens, so hopefully our opponent doesn't have a super fast draw. It's probably good news that they have yet to cast anything. So I think we just want to play the Prismatic Lens this turn. And okay, it looks like our opponent has a way to find black mana with the Twisted Abomination. So this could be another long game like the first one. And unless we draw our only island, we're not going to be able to cast the Phantom Monster right away. For what it's worth, though, if we draw any basic, we can make white with our prismatic lens and play our white Honden if we want to. Oh my gosh, our opponent was taking the Hundens from us. Honden of Knight's Reach. That's actually really good against us, as it turns out. And, okay, so there's a white Honden. So we've got, a white land. So we've got some options, but we may just want to get aggressive since our opponent is going to start making us discard cards. So I kind of like just running out this Extract from Darkness. If nothing gets milled better, we can take this Twisted Abomination. And yep, gonna just grab the Twisted Abomination. And we'll see. It could be that our opponent has a removal spell for it, but if not, it's a 5/3 regenerator. And so, since we're trying to be on the aggressive plan, I think we just go ahead, discard our white Honden, even though it kind of sucks to have to do that. And wow, it looks like our opponent's attacking with Phyrexian Rager. Do we bite and block? That's a tough question. It could be that our opponent has a pump spell or tragic slip, so we're just gonna take it. Good attack by our opponent if it was a bluff. And it looks like our opponent is gonna Night's Whisper themselves. So they've already dealt 3 damage just by drawing cards with Night's Whisper and Phyrexian Rager. And here's Elephant Guide. So that's gonna make the Phyrexian Rager more of an issue. And we actually drew our blue Honden, so that can offset the black Honden our opponent has in play. So we probably just want to go ahead and play that now. And this is where we kind of regret having discarded the white Honden, but sometimes a card like Honden of Knight's Reach really puts pressure on you because it's just so hard to know exactly what to discard. And this is another one of those spots where it's like, what on earth do we discard? The Phantom Monster is good, but Annihilate's good. Yeah, we're just going to discard the Phantom Monster. Doesn't feel good to discard Visara. This card is good, though, but if our opponent plays a good green or white creature, even in this case, we're going to want to Annihilate it. Also, if the Elephant Guide dies, or the Phyrexian Rager dies, it does create a green creature. And here we go, with an Emperor Crocodile. So, and our opponent's actually just serving in. So this could end up in a bit of a racing situation. So, we can just annihilate the Crocodile. That's one option. Another option is to attack first, see if our opponent blocks, and then proceed from there. So yeah, let's attack first. That way, if our opponent does have something like Tragic Slip, kind of plays around it a little bit. So yeah, our opponent's going to block. So we're just going to regenerate. And it looks like that exchange was fine, and our opponent has Tragic Slip. So that's why we didn't annihilate first. We attacked first, and there's the Tragic Slip. So let's give ourselves a pat on the back for making that play. And now we can commune with the gods. It looks like Mana War is going to be the card that we want here. So let's grab it. And do we play the Swiftwater Cliffs or hold it and then plan on discarding it to the Honden? I think we just hold it and plan on discarding it to the Honden. So that way we keep as much gas as possible in our hand. We have this Mana War we can use on the Phyrexian Rager. And we'll see what happens this turn. Oh wow, so it looks like our opponent's actually burning a Sylvan Might and just getting aggressive here. So that's 7 damage. That's a lot of damage. So hopefully we don't just die, but we'll see how things play out. We're definitely just locked in at this point to playing Mana War. There's not much else we can do. So we're going to bounce the Phyrexian Rager. And just getting the Blossoming Sands feels right. Getting the Blossoming Sands into play feels right. But we are going to have to make a tough discard here. And I think we just finally want to pitch the Annihilate. Hopefully our opponent doesn't play a green threat where we kick ourselves for discarding this Annihilate. But Visara is so powerful, and Monk Idealist can get us back the White Honden that's in our graveyard. So that's kind of the reasoning behind discarding the Annihilate. And here's a Havoc Demon. So Havoc Demon plus this flashback of Sylvan Might does threaten lethal damage. So we're kind of looking for something like a Pacifism, which we drew. So pretty fortunate to have drawn it. Let's go ahead and cast it. And our opponent's still got 3 cards in hand. But we're going to go ahead and use this Monk Idealist now to get back our White Honden. And we've actually got a bunch of good stuff in our hand. So it's going to be a tough decision in terms of what we want to discard here. So it's tough, but I'm going to discard the Maelstrom Wanderer. We're just a couple turns away from casting it, and we just want to make sure we get to that point in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and discard it. It definitely hurts to have to do it. But if we can just stay alive for another turn or two, we'll be in good shape. So here we have the option between casting the White Honden and casting Visara. And both of those options are pretty appealing, actually. So the question is, which one do we want to go with? And I like just playing Visara because there's might be a circumstance where we actually need it to block this turn to stay alive. But if our opponent does have a removal spell, like an Eyeblight's Ending, for instance, that's definitely going to hurt. And we're going to discard the plains, keeping the White Honden still in hand. And it looks like our opponent's just going to start to make some tokens with Lissalana Huntmaster. But hopefully this Visara doesn't die to a removal spell. If we untap here, I'm definitely feeling good about our chances to win the game. So if our opponent does attack, we just have to be worried about Sylvan Might, but it looks like there's not going to be an attack this turn. And of course, naturally, there's the second copy of Honden of Cleansing Fire, but it's okay. We're going to play one of them, and that's going to threaten to buffer our life total, and we don't mind discarding one now to our opponent's discard from Honden of Night's Reach. And we'll see if our opponent elects to make an attack. If so, it's almost like a desperation move. So yeah, this is a pretty weird attack from our opponent. We can definitely block here with our Monk Idealists. And I think we just go ahead and block with Visara. I'm not sure what the downside is here, but I guess maybe we'll see. So our opponent's flashing back Sylvan Might, but we are going to try to kill the list Alana Huntmaster. If our opponent then has something like Shelter or something like that, that would be bad, but it looks like nothing's going to happen really. And now we can start making some more aggressive attacks. So, yeah, our life total is now at a point where we can just attack with both of our creatures. And it looks like our opponent's just going to block. So I like just playing our land and passing the turn rather than playing the Wake of Vultures, because we saw that our opponent has ways to get rid of their own Havoc Demon, and we have lethal on board with our Visara. So there's really no reason to play our Wake of Vultures even. And our opponent could very easily just be conceding here. Hopefully that's what's going on. But we'll see in a moment. So we are going to go down to essentially 6 cards in our deck now. But that's okay. Hopefully we're just going to seal the game with this Visara attack. If all goes well. And yep, that's going to be the match.